Hi, I'm Josh, and if you've clicked on this video, I'm pretty sure you want to make a secret booklight switch. This is a situation I found myself in several years ago. I had just installed some sweet LED lights on top of our bookcase, and I needed a way to turn them on and off. Instead of using a boring old switch, I started to research how to use a book as a switch, and I quickly discovered that most people use a pull string switch to pull this off. Then I came across an Instructable by a guy who goes by the name Improbable Construct, and his solution was very elegant. So much so I had to make it and modify it, and I've been using it for the past 2.5 years. So if you guys are interested in making one of these things for yourself, you're in the right place. Let's do this. You don't need a lot for this build. First thing is a 3/4 inch by 1/16 inch aluminum bar. Then you're going to need 4 number 6 by 1/4 inch self-tapping screws. The key to making this thing work is a single pull double throw on push button switch. This is really difficult to find, so I have a link in the description for that. You're also going to need a 3/4 inch wide brass hinge, some shrink tubing, and some rubber tape. I'm also going to be using a Lutron lamp dimmer. This isn't required, but it makes the final product a little bit nicer. All of these things ran me about $35. We start by finding a book we'd like to use and then measuring the distance from its spine to the back of its pages. It's 6 inches in this case, but I want to add a 1/4 inch to that to get 6 1/4. The aluminum bar will form the main structure of the switch. We need to mark this at 6.5 inches and then slide the roller down another 6 1/4, which is the dimension that we measured. Next we make a mark at a 1/2 inch and then again at a 1/2 inch. And then finally we make a mark at 1.5 inches. And this is the last mark. The aluminum bar is cut to length using this final mark as a guide. Next, it was time to get to bending. If you know my channel, I'm sure you've seen the video of me building this brake, but if not, I have a link up there to how I made that. For my first attempt, I used a bending brake for the first bend and then my sheet metal tool for the second, but the sheet metal tool did a really bad job. For the second attempt, I decided to try to bend it in the vise. I had to use a punch to get in there and eventually bend it around and hammer it into place, and I ended up with a very crooked piece. I was getting tired of marking and cutting aluminum, so I decided to try something new. I made the first bend at 1.5 inches from the end of the bar. Then I slipped this bent end into a special hole that I had made in the face of my bending brake, and proceeded to bend the first of the 1/2 inch bends. Once again, I slipped the bent end through the hole, and then bent the next of the 1/2 inch bends, but in the opposite direction. The last bend that had to be made was the bend at the 6.5 inch mark, which was the first mark that we had made on the aluminum. With the aluminum bent, it was time to drill some holes. The first hole was for the switch, and that was 3/16 of an inch in from the edge. I drilled through with an 1/8 inch bit and then followed that up with a 19/64 bit. That ended up being a little bit too big, but it still works. Next I needed to drill the holes to mount the hinge to the main switch bracket. I drilled the holes with a 3/32 inch bit, which is just slightly smaller than the diameter of the self-tapping screws. Finally, 2 5/32 inch holes were drilled at the end of the 1.5 inch tab. With the main switch bracket complete, it's time to move on to the lever. The lever is 2 1/4 inches long and will be used to help depress the switch more easily. Since this will attach to the other side of the hinge, I needed to drill out the same 3 32nd inch holes in the lever. To function properly, the lever needs to be bent into a slight S-curve. To do this, I simply clamped it into my sheet metal vice grips and then bent it on both ends until it had the correct curve. I later had to come back and adjust this a little bit, but it was pretty close. With the lever finished, the hinge was attached to the main bracket using the self-tapping screws, and then the other side of the hinge was attached to the lever using the same screws. The screws protruding on the inside of the bracket need to be cut flush because the book will rest over that part of the bracket. And that'll wrap up the bracket. Now all we got to do is the electrics. The Lutron lamp dimmer is unique because the plug feeds its way to the dimmer, which then in turn feeds back to the outlet on the other side. This means if we simply cut the wire, we can use it through the switch and have a nice pass-through plug outlet combo that's controlled by the switch. As I mentioned, the key to making this light switch work is the single pole double throw on push button switch. This means that every time the button is pushed, either one of the two legs is on relative to the middle. The on condition is crucial because the switch needs to be activated when it is depressed. After sliding shrink tube over the ends of both wires, these wires were attached to the center leg and one of the side legs of the switch where they were soldered into place. It is critical that these connections be entirely covered by the shrink tube because this is 110 volts flowing through these wires to the switch and you do not want a short connection. You also do not want any exposed wires as this could be quite dangerous. Using the rubber tape for the first time is quite interesting. After you cut it off the roll, you must stretch it to about 3 times its original length to activate it. The tape is not sticky, but when it adheres to itself, it forms a single piece of rubber. To protect my bookshelf, I wrapped the back of the lever and the front of the hinge with the rubber, and then I also applied a piece at the front of the switch, which keeps it from slipping when you tip the book forward. At this point, the switch can be put in its hole and affixed in place. The wire at the top of the switch is held in place with a zip tie to prevent it from pulling out. All that remains to be done is to slip the switch into the spine of the book, and our switch is finished. The pass-through connector is connected to a power source, and then our test lamp is connected to the other side. As you can see, it works really well. I added the lever to give the switch a little bit more leverage as the weight of the book wasn't enough to depress it. If you're making your own switch and you have any questions, please comment down below. I'll do my best to answer them. And if along the way you discover a better way of doing this than what I have, I'd love to hear about that as well. That's it.